Okay. Is it running? Is it working? I've got emails coming through on my phone in the background, in case anyone wonders what the pinging noises are. Yeah, I think we're running. I think we are good. Okay, well, welcome to another end of the week live stream where I'm going to just be talking either with you or at you, depending on if you're watching this after the stream or if you're watching this as I'm here actually recording it. At the moment, no one is here, so I'm just going to keep talking, whilst probably just checking that that wasn't anything important coming through on my emails, which it wasn't. It was Facebook and a random newsletter, so there's that. But otherwise, guys, I hope you've had a great week. And the stuff that I kind of wanted to talk about today was some stuff that's been in my head in regards to planning out kind of next week's. Oh, something broke there. Just for a moment, there was a delay. But we're back. But yeah, the stuff that I want to talk about this week, whilst, either people turn up or they don't, who knows, is just some of the stuff that's been going through my head with just some of the things that I've been recording these last couple of weeks, and some of the stuff and how it all kind of pans together. Because last week, because I record everything a week in advance, sometimes I lose kind of track of which week we're on in regards to when videos went up and stuff. Because in my head, I've got next week's videos fresh and ready, even though I've not even uploaded them yet. But, I'm thinking about something that to me, recording it would have been 2 weeks ago, but for you guys seeing it would have been last week. But the stuff from last week about why people fall for us, or the stages of intimacy, how to be more confident in the bedroom, assertiveness versus aggression, and then some of the stuff I've done this week with relationship dynamics, overcoming perfectionism, stopping ourselves from taking stuff personally, and controlling our emotions, and some of the stuff I'm doing next week in regards to reactions and insecurities. In regards to all of those things, the stuff that's been going through my head the last couple of days has been just how so much of what I talk about, I'll cut it down into something that's manageable, a list about one thing, or us discussing one concept, or me breaking down something that might seem daunting to a lot of people, like, I don't know, certain areas around planning or around interviews or stuff like that. And, some of the stuff that stands out to me is that we as humans are very good at breaking down our problems. I mean, I think that's probably one of the things that has made us a kind of top tier creature on this planet. We take a lot of things and we instantly want to attach labels to them, or cut them up and separate them out into little boxes. We see it for our approach to categorizing creatures, for instance, our taxonomical view of things. We do it for problems that we have, the way that I break down different subject matter for videos, where it's like, oh, well, today we're only going to be talking about this slice of your life that might be very, very narrow but very important. How much time do you actually spend in the bedroom with a partner getting worried about what's going on? That in terms of the amount of time that it takes up in your life, and some of the other things, it's very, very narrow, very, very small slice of your experience as a human being. And yet it's so important to you. It sticks in your head. It's something that can change the entire way that you operate in the world. And, thinking through some of this stuff and just how it all relates, especially when I did my video on this Monday just gone about relationship dynamics. Because everything else that I had talked about from the week before, everything else that I talked about for the rest of the week, and stuff that I'm going to be talking about next week as well, which, you guys will see, it's all connected, and it all adds up into those relationship dynamics that I was talking about. So, if I go through the various videos I've done and just kind of relate them in, because, Why People Fall For You was one of the videos that I did a couple of weeks ago, or I recorded it a couple of weeks ago, it went up last week, and how daft we are in some of the things that we find attractive, and how it's, studies have been done to prove that those are things that happen to us, but we don't really have any way of going, yeah, that's a thing that happens to us, but we're aware of it all the time. We're consciously making that decision. But it's like the way that you fall for someone can then potentially inform the dynamics that are created. If you've fallen for someone because they're very cute and meek and mild and all the rest of it, then that might lead to a relationship where it's a lot more warm and cozy because you're finding that middle ground to bring yourself to that person's level. Or it might create, if they've fallen for you because you're more assertive and dominant, then it might mean that you've got that kind of dominant versus submissive kind of behavior that might not expand into the world of kink or anything like that, but may very well set up an established kind of dynamic, or it may establish a dynamic for you guys rather, where there's one person that always takes the lead and one person who always follows up with whatever the directive is that's been given. If you're coming in and there's an establishment early on of lying, cheating, withholding information from each other, avoiding questions and ignoring one another, but not ever really parting ways, then that can establish a set of relationship dynamics that then becomes very unhealthy over time. So there's a lot of stuff like that. Those initial kind of first impressions, those first interactions, can often lead to more negative consequences, or also establish very positive ones in the way that we interact. Talking about the 6 stages of intimacy, where you've got the relationship dynamics that change over time, or new ones turn up and replace old ones, or the old ones are only there because they are being very consciously and pointedly maintained by the people involved. And yet lots of people don't really know what the stages of intimacy are, and as a result they will assume that, say, the honeymoon period, where you always look at someone and think that they're wonderful and that you've both got really high sex drives, and there's all that adventure and exploration and the world seems wonderful. There's all of that stuff going on, and people don't necessarily realize that that's going to disappear. And this is one of the things that kind of bugs me with groups of people, be it for religious reasons or political reasons or whatever else, who will suggest that you shouldn't have kind of sex before marriage, or you shouldn't have boyfriends and girlfriends before you're looking to actually find the one and get married, or anything like that. Because going through those stages of intimacy, if the first person you meet, the first intimacy that you have, it's going to start off with that honeymoon period, if it even gets that far, and then from there it could turn into, right, now you've got to make a decision in this moment about what you're going to do with that person for the rest of your life. And then that could be really, really horrible for both people involved. There needs to be trial and error, experimentation, working, knowing yourself, knowing the other person, working everything out, actually sitting down and having discussions with them about what the two of you want, all that kind of thing. So, having that awareness of those stages of intimacy, maybe even if you haven't had that many relationships beforehand and things like that, it's useful. Like, I wasn't completely aware of them when I was having my first relationships, and as a result, some of my first relationships were appalling. They were damaging in all kinds of different ways, and the way that those relationships were, part of the damage was just due to the fact that I didn't realise that the feelings that I had at the time would change or fade, or the dynamics would shift. And so, me being younger and very into what I was doing with that other person, I wasn't prepared for the shock of the changes, or the shock where the carpet was kind of pulled straight out from under me, when it wasn't just the dynamics of the relationship that changed, but it was some of the other situations around it that changed. Um, you know, Again, being confident in bed. I mean, I think that's a big one for relationship dynamics, really, because if you're like, I'm going to talk about insecurities and things to one degree or another next week. But in regards to kind of being confident in bed and moving past those insecurities, that's a very specific situation that, again, doesn't take up a huge amount of time. Like, even if you go with your partner for like a full day sex session, then it's still like that's one day out of potentially like months that you're having to spend with your partner just doing day-to-day stuff, or existing, or talking, or learning about each other, enjoying the world together. And so, that confidence in the bedroom can set up some great kind of reinforcement for the dynamics that you've already established. Where you are willing to throw yourself into that very intimate, very close, very tangible interaction, but the dynamics that are built, that you would be reinforcing with those moments in the bedroom, or let's face it, wherever you two end up getting on top of each other or doing whatever it is that you want to do, it's still a case of the dynamics themselves are what matter. This is why you see a lot of relationships who are kind of just attractive people being attracted to each other because they're attractive and the sex is great or whatever. They don't tend to last very long because there's those dynamics aren't there to be reinforced. It's just sex and attraction for the sake of sex and attraction. And so then when you have that shift in stages between kind of the beginning of a relationship and then the next stage, and then when you actually start getting into proper commitment and the day-to-day stuff and reinforcement of all that, it all falls to pieces. It all starts to collapse and crumble. And that's where you see divorce rates being very high, or messy breakups between, especially between celebrities and things as well. It's like all of those things that we can see, that are much higher profile. They're purely there because of that set of breakdowns, or that there's nothing there to reinforce with, say, good sex. And to be fair, being confident in the bedroom doesn't even necessarily mean good sex. It means that you can just go through with it, that you can sort yourself out and do what you want to do. But, aggressiveness and assertiveness as well. There are lots of people, a good number of people actually, that bother me in a way. And I've had some of these people as friends as well. It's been kind of upsetting because we don't get upset and angry and stuff like that unless, about someone that we're close to, unless they are proving to us that our insecurities seem to be true. A parent isn't going to get pissed off at their kid unless the kid is demonstrating that they're a shit parent. You're not going to get upset and angry with a partner unless they seem to make you out to be less of a good partner or something like that. And so this is where, like, being confident, you might be confident in your abilities in the bedroom, fine, but part of that has to be that has to be tempered with more of an assertive nature, where you're looking for a win-win, rather than an aggressive one where you're just looking to impose on someone else. And there is a place in sex and sexuality for imposition. There's a large section of kind of modern kind of kink and fetish stuff that is built around imposition, and especially after things like 50 Shades of Grey, which it may very well be a terrible example of that kind of community or those kind of activities. It has become more prevalent and more prominent to the people at large, as it were. And so, when you've got that level of confusion where people can't tell aggressiveness from assertiveness, or they confuse the two, it can end up with a lot of people getting hurt. But worst of all is when you've got someone who gets aggressive because, even if they're confident in their abilities, if there is an issue, they don't know how to look for that win-win between themselves and their partner, and they only ever look to win, only ever look to impose. And that, you know, you can have your friendly bits and pieces, you can have your misunderstandings. Certain people are less tactful than others, so sometimes they will put their foot in their mouth, say something that maybe makes their partner raise an eyebrow, like, really, you wanted to throw that in now when we're doing something else, you know, or whatever. There are those moments, and again, relationship dynamics that are established are going to be the things that temper those moments, you know. But then it's a case of going, how do you know, in the case of the person responding as well, it shouldn't be an aggressive response. It should be one that, again, is looking for that win-win. For, you know, that, oh, a friend of mine has just come to talk to us, and my partner has just literally stuck their foot in their mouth. The win-win is to save your partner from themselves, but also ensure that that your friend isn't upset, and also make sure that you can show your face here again, preferably with your partner as well. You know, there's a three-way win condition there. And an assertive person will try and look for that. They will try and find the compromise. They'll try and find the arrangement or the discourse that will allow that to happen. But an aggressive person will usually either kind of lash out at the friend if the friend retaliates, or if the friend calls issue with said partner putting foot in said face, or they will lash out at the partner for making them look bad, feel bad, embarrassing them, and whatever else. And like, that shouldn't happen. You know, it's all right to be surprised, but it's how you deal with the surprise that then shows off kind of what you are, what you would do. And in a lot of instances that I've been witness to, especially among certain groups of friends, the surprise element goes from potentially very well-meaning and warm or whatever else, especially when friends are drunk, because, you know, they people say stupid shit, but it gets to a point where then lashing out occurs, and that sucks. You know, that's terrible. And again, though, that's another way of reinforcing certain elements within the relationship dynamics, and it can, again, sometimes it can be a real wake-up call to a partner, you know, where their partner has been fine all along, and then all of a sudden they snap because there's something that has been done has been like the 50th time, and this time there's no way to recover it easily, so they've actually got upset. And that can be a wake-up call, but if it happens every single time, then then it becomes a case of there has never been any assertiveness, there's never been any communication or leeway given. It's literally just been lashing out every time, and that can become a really negative cycle. You know, it becomes the kind of, or it can become the very stereotypical kind of beaten wife stuck in her relationship kind of thing, where she does something, he doesn't like that he's not controlled her, or that she's not been, you know, done everything to the extent that he wants in the right way. He lashes out, she feels that it's for her own good or whatever, because he can rationalize it to her, and as a result, then she doesn't remove herself from the situation because it seems to be for her betterment, and it's a mess. It's horrible. You know, if you want to better your partner, if you want to provide them with stuff like feedback, then you know, let's have the discussion to take the whole discourse to one side, and have an arrangement that way, so that people can actually get on board with what's being said and stuff like that. But again, that's a dynamic that needs to be taken early on. Like, in a lot of relationships that I've had, one of the things that I've made a point of going is like, look, honesty and discussion, those are the things that we need to base it on, and then fairness has to be in all the things that we do. Yeah, like, if someone wants to check my phone, or if I'm willing to let someone use my phone, then they need to be willing to do the same way. You know, it has to be honest, upfront, straightforward, and easy. But otherwise, because if it's not, then it becomes a case of, well, it's imbalanced. One person is hiding something, or one person has the potential to hide something carte blanche, whilst the other person has to display everything that they have. You know, in regards to everything, there has to be that two-way street. I shouldn't knock my drink over, but there has to be that two-way street between people, because otherwise, as said, those relationship dynamics become potentially very slanted. But again, even if you've got that division between, say, one person always calling the shots and one person always kind of doing as they're told or whatever else, that can still work, but there still has to be that honesty, still has to be that level of fairness, still has to be that level of communication. Because the honesty, well, that comes out, honesty and integrity, and it comes down to kind of the rules of what's being said and what's being done. The communication actually has to take place so that the person who's being given the instructions or wants the instructions isn't just left to languish, and then they're told off for things they didn't even know that they were supposed to do. And then in regards to fairness, well, fairness needs to be the limitations, right? Even if it's an asymmetric relationship dynamic, there still has to be that closing down on where the lines are drawn. You know, is it that there are times where imposition can't happen? Are there times when the person who is taking the instructions is allowed to potentially throw the instructions back or disregard them or whatever else, as long as there is, again, communication or whatever else? You know, those limits and things, that fairness. A game doesn't need to be, or anything in life doesn't need to be fair in terms of every single person getting the same thing, but it needs to be fair in terms of balance. This is why we have, to take games as an example, because games can be applied to so many things, you have an asymmetric shooter or something, or an asymmetric game where you've got a team of 4 people versus 1 person. You know, Dead by Daylight. I think that's what it's called. You know, where you've got a team of 4 or 5 survivors running away and trying to escape from one supernatural serial killer. You know, that's a fair game because they both have advantages and disadvantages, regardless of whether they are the 1 or the 4 or 5. But then, you know, they do have their different roles. You know, where the killer is imposing on the team, but the team has their abilities has their way of fighting back, of doing their own thing. There's that balance line there, even if the balance line isn't drawn exactly from like left to right or from top to bottom. There's still a line there that allows for a balance to be struck. And, you know, that has to be there in every relationship, regardless of how extreme maybe some of the impositional elements are or some of the submissive elements are. You know, there still needs to be that counterpoint, that kind of balance, or that fulcrum point, rather, that has everything balanced carefully on it. But then the other things that I ended up talking about this week, stuff like controlling your emotions and not taking things personally. When you're talking about sensitive subjects, like, you know, some of the stuff that I was saying about intimacy and some of the stuff that I was saying about being confident in the bedroom in regards to communication and stuff, you know, you can't be just so sensitive that everything that's said is taken personally. And, you know, you need to be able to control your emotions around it, because otherwise you're not going to learn anything from what's being said. You know, let's say you're a guy, you've got a girlfriend, and she turns around to you and says, you're not as big as I usually like. That's fine. That's her suggesting that there's, you know, she's still there with you, and she's informing you of something else, and then maybe looking for you to solve some of the problem that she's having, where you don't have as much as she would maybe like. Yeah. But if you just take that personally and you don't control yourself and your response, your emotions, then you're going to flip out, you're going to get upset, you're going to get angry, you're going to feel dejected, without listening to what she's actually saying, which is she still wants to enjoy stuff with you, but you're not maybe physically equipped in the way that she is used to, or the way that she prefers. In which case, she's still there with you. She's still talking to you about this stuff. She just wants to find a solution. She wants to find a way that she can get everything that she wants, whilst you get everything that you want. You know, you shouldn't take the that whole thing personally, and you definitely should control your emotions. You know, I wouldn't want to see anyone have that kind of feedback given to them where it's potentially going to be very constructive in a conversation. It allows for some very useful and interesting further discussion and maybe some further experimentation, which would be great. You know, it might very well be an awful lot of fun. But you know, if you get angry about it and flip out and suggest that, I don't know, it's because of her past relationships that she would like more, and that any normal nice girl would be fine. You know, if you're going to go off on that really nice guy kind of psychotic, neurotic flip out, regardless of which end of the spectrum you end up, you know, if you're going to do that, then that's going to be horrible for everyone involved. If you just burst out into tears, then, you know, that's not going to do you any favors. And also on top of it, she's not saying that you can help what's going on necessarily. She's just, again, voicing a preference potentially. But the same goes the other way, where a guy might be like, do you know what, you're curvier than the girls that I'm usually with. He's not saying that's a bad thing. He's still saying that he's there, you know. And again, there is an element of it depends how they're saying it, yeah. But you know, if it's like, oh, well, you're a tad curvier, so kind of enjoying time with you, enjoying sex with you, stood up or in certain positions is a bit more difficult. That should start a discussion on how you can then manage those things, how you can rearrange, what other things you can try, stuff you can experiment with. It shouldn't instantly become a case of then her getting upset and turning around and being negative and not controlling her emotions or anything like that. You know, it works both ways. There are people on both male side, female side, and everything in between and in orbit of and all that kind of thing, where, you know, taking stuff personally and not controlling your emotions enough causes breakdowns. You know, you hit relationship dynamics where everything else could be fine, and then you get to the bedroom with the confident stuff we were talking about, and then into that stuff, trying to work it out, trying to have the best possible experience that you can have, and yet then one person gives some feedback, and feedback is good. Feedback lets you know what you need to learn. It lets you know kind of what your partner wants. It lets you set a standard, find a way to practice with each other, all that kind of stuff. You know, it's important above all else. Like, I wouldn't ever do like a full 360 feedback review with a person who I was enjoying an intimate relationship, with. But it becomes a case of going, you know, there's time for feedback. You know, there's time for practice. You're not going to ever learn anyone entirely without practice and exploration and feedback. And to have the best possible intimate relationships, practice, feedback, and communication are the things that are going to allow the sexual part of that to be amazing. You know, without that, you're kind of stumped. You know, and I think it's really sad when, especially amongst older couples, that lived in a time, or had the kind of prime of their life in a time where there wasn't as much liberalism around certain areas of sex. There wasn't as much discussion around certain areas of sex. And, you know, they find at times it's just really difficult to reinforce the relationship dynamics, and people drift apart because there's not that closeness, and because they aren't prepared for the stages of intimacy that, again, we talked about before. But then the one other video that I did this week was something that I actually had to tackle. I kind of told my own story in regards to general perfectionism and struggling with that when I was a kid, where I wanted everything to just be so. Everything just needed to be just right. And I needed to kind of fix that thinking so that I could actually just be productive. But there was an element of me, especially when I was first sexually active, that that perfectionist streak that doesn't really ever go away entirely. It's just a way of managing it and changing your perspective so that you're better equipped and better prepared to deal with the world, because the world is not perfect, you're not perfect, nothing's ever perfect, and so it's unfair and unreasonable to want those things to one degree or another. And yet you'd have there are so many people who are focused on getting exactly what they want from another person during sex, you know. And I've talked about this before in regards to things like online dating as well, where people have their expectations, and it's the meat market thing where they are shopping for a specific product, and yet that doesn't exist. You're never going to have that person who is exactly the specification that you have on your shopping list, or anything like that. And as a result, that the perfectionist element in relationships can kind of come from both sides. So you can have the person who's maybe being more demanding, whose perfectionist behaviors are more focused around this person should be perfect, and they're not perfect. So I'm either going to make them perfect, or I'm going to make their life hell until they decide to be perfect. Or I'm just going to leave them, end the relationship straight off. So there's that side of things where it's, again, maybe the more aggressive, more impositional side, where it's like, you need to be perfect because I say you need to be perfect. But then you've got the other side of things where you've got the person who wants everything to be perfect. I always want to help him finish. I always want to help her finish. I always want to be there for them. I always want to make sure that I never do anything wrong, and that they're never upset and they're never angry, and all of those kind of things. And yet then when those things happen, they get very down on themselves, they get very upset. And again, this is kind of what we were talking about in regards to taking things personally, as well, where you have the one group that will tend to lash out because of it, because they need to impose themselves on the situation, because of course it's their responsibility, when it's not. And then you've got the other group of people who are like, oh, well, everything's going wrong and it's all my fault, even though it probably isn't. So, you've got the people who, this is a thing, the perfectionist streak is definitely a thing when it comes to kind of guys getting girls off, or girls doing what guys want. For at least from my experience in the conversations that I've had, because it's a case of, oh, I want to get her off. Well, fine. Have you asked her what she wants? Have you asked her what works for her, or anything like that? And more often than not, the answer to that question, or those sets of questions, are no's, resounding no's. There hasn't been any communication around it. And so as a result, it kind of grinds everything to a halt. And as a result, those relationship dynamics that they might be forming, positive, loving ones or whatever else, don't necessarily get the reinforcement. Because again, it's about expectations. So much in life is just about managing expectations. And, where you've got the management of expectations is a thing that can be very hard to do. But this is where, again, one of the videos that YouTube suppressed of mine, one of the only ones that they just out and out just closed the doors on to one extent or another, which you can still watch, it's still up and everything, but they when I was still monetized, they removed monetization from it, and they had a little whinge at me about it. Was the orgasm objective. For so many people, orgasm is the only objective of sex, because it's the only objective that's tangible, and yet so many people forget that sex is about having a good time as well. There's a big part of it that's about bonding and being close to people, and yet it's something that people forget about. So it's kind of that problem there, where people are so focused on giving their partner the perfect orgasm every single time. Yeah, there are guys that I know who have felt so, they've maybe not had that many sexual experiences, and they've gone, I feel so bad because, you know, I've been with her twice now and neither she hasn't come at all either time. It's like, well, what did you do? Oh, well, I stuck my penis inside her, wiggled it around for a bit, and that was kind of it. It's like, yeah, have you asked her if that's all she needs? No. Well, maybe a conversation is where you need to go first before worrying too much about this. Because then if she says, well, what I need is for you to handle all of this heavy machinery and wear this costume and speak to me in 3 different languages that you don't speak, that's a lot of prep work. That's a lot of stuff that you might not be able to do. In which case, then I wouldn't say feel bad about it. I would go, that was a lot of stuff for you to be expected to do on the regular. But the other way it kind of works is just going, well, have the conversation, see what happens. You know, there's no other way around it. And so when you've got that perfectionist streak where it's like, I want to do the best all the time, I want to do what's expected of me perfectly all the time, cut yourself some slack, because people are difficult, people are hard, relationships are even harder. You know, going through those points that I went through in regards to overcoming perfectionism the other day, like, those can be applied to most situations. I would say that they can definitely be applied to sexual ones as well. But it's like, obviously relationships aren't just sex, but considering the amount of kind of carry over between the dynamics that you establish in your day-to-day, how you talk to each other, how you interact with each other, how physical you are in regards to just holding each other's hands or hugging or kissing or anything like that, how you are when you're upset, how you are when you're happy, how you interact with each other when you're upset or happy or whatever, how attentive you are to each other, how consistent you are in the things that you do and how you do them. You know, all of those things matter, and you know, that's what the relationship dynamics are built from. But then, you know, as I said, there's reinforcement from the sex into the relationship dynamics, and at times they can be, you know, the sex can be so prevalent in a relationship, and the relationship dynamics can be so well defined and so well reinforced that there's not really much of a disconnect between going from just your happy day-to-day situation and jumping into a bedroom scenario where it's very isolated from the rest of the world and from other stimuli, and it's just the two of you. But if you're consistent in the way that your relationship works and in the way that you treat each other and all that kind of thing, then there's a good chance that you'll get into that new situation, and that new situation will be absolutely fine, absolutely normal, absolutely comfortable. And that takes a lot of time as well. That's something that a lot of people don't necessarily realise. All of these things just take so much time. You know, practice and communicating. Communicating can take just so much time by itself, and that's asking questions when you're not even having sex. Yeah, something's twigged in your mind, and you're like, oh well, actually, can I ask you a question? Because there's just something that's come into my head, and I just kind of want to ask. Yeah. And then, if you know, as I've said before in other videos, one of the best things you can do when it comes to asking questions is ask if you can ask the question. Because if someone says no, then okay, fine. And as long as they're not just joking around and being dickheads, then, you know, if they're genuinely saying no, not right now, fine. You know that it's not the time to ask a question. You know that they're not either in a good headspace for it, or maybe they know what the question's going to be and they don't want to answer it or something like that. Whilst if you've said, can I ask you a question? And then they go, yes. Then they've given you permission to ask a question. They've opened up to the idea that they are going to be, an inquiry is going to be posed to them, and the response is going to be wanted. So, you know, when it comes to sexual stuff, sensitive stuff, you know, going into it with an open attitude and going, look, can I ask you a question? Because something's been playing on my mind. And they go, okay, yeah, sure, what? And you go, the other night, that thing you did with the corkscrew and that weird weird monkey creature that you brought into the bedroom. That was really weird. But is that something that you really like, or what? And so then you can get into the minutiae of it. You can get into understanding it. If it's something because there's one thing that stands out to me. There are some people who have a certain thing that they want to do, and yet they're not willing to talk about it because they're worried about judgment, because they're worried that it seems weird or whatever else. And yet, obviously depending on what it is, but those people then potentially limit themselves, and by limiting themselves by not introducing them as those things that they need or that they would really like as ideas into a relationship or into the bedroom, then that potentially leaves their partner feeling like they're not good enough, feeling like they haven't done a good enough job or whatever else. And then if they continue, even when asked, to hide it from that partner, then the person who has those needs or has those wants, it becomes a spiral of one person that wants to help, wants to do the best, might be asking, and the other person is hiding it from them because they're afraid. And it's a case of, bring it out in the open. If it's really something the other person can't deal with, then they will tell you, But I would, at least from the experiences that I've had and from the experiences that I've discussed with others, be they clients or friends or whoever, it's a situation where, if someone brings something up, then there's usually at least a little bit of interest and exploration around it. As long as it's something for that person and not something that person necessarily wants to impose or do or use on the other person straight away. And even then, there might be some interest and some discourse. But it's the whole... There's an old story that goes around, and I think it gets quoted far too often, or kind of assimilated and I'm not appropriated, but kind of taken on by too many people, because its origin has kind of become kind of muddy. Or maybe it's just the same thing happening time and time and time again, and it's just turning up again and again and again because it's a good example, like the way I'm going to use it right now. But it's the whole story of a relationship therapist having a husband and wife in, and they want to improve their sex lives because they feel like they're drifting apart. And he tells, and they have a separate session, and he tells the therapist that he has this fantasy about sucking his wife's toes, and then the wife comes in for a separate session, and she says that she has this thing about enjoying her toes being sucked, and then the therapist actually sits both of them down and gets the husband to ask the wife, and then of course they're like, oh, that was a fantasy for both of us? Well, we never knew. It's like, yeah, well, you should talk about it, have the discussions, because if you have the discussions, you find out. You might go, I've got this really weird fantasy and I don't think anyone will like me for it, or I've got this really weird need to when I'm enjoying myself sexually, and it's something that helps me enjoy it more. And yet, you don't know if your partner's going to have that or be inclined towards it unless you actually open your mouth and say something, right? So, it's important to have those conversations. It's important to say those things and discuss that stuff with the person that you want to share intimate time with. And it can be uncomfortable at times, but again, this is where having those open, honest kind of pillars in the relationship as useful, like if you're being honest with one another, then there should be, if someone's asking a question, then you should be able to say, I'm not really comfortable answering that, or I don't want to answer that right now, I'm not in the right headspace, or something like that. Or you can turn around and just answer them. There should be those two ways of doing it. It shouldn't be a case of going, no, I'm never answering that. And it shouldn't be a case of going, like this question is so abnormal, because you never have conversations like this where questions are asked. And there's always like where I've talked before about role models, and the best role models are usually the fantastical role models that do not exist in reality, because real people are flawed in ways that are too close to home in a lot of instances, or you can be let down by real people as real role models. And so the best role models are usually fictional, be they, as I do with myself, going, well, this is what I want to be, and that version of me is my role model. You know, that character version of myself that I've made, and that's what I have to live up to. That version of me is fictional, never going to let me down. But the same can go for relationships. You know, there are so many times when dealing with couples or dealing with people wanting relationship coaching and all that kind of thing, that myself and other coaches that I've talked to, a lot of the stuff that they start off with is usually sitting those people down and being like, okay, well, what is it that you want? You know, where do you want to go? In, you know, getting them to visualize what they want together as a relationship, because that again also allows you to define the specifics. You know, one person goes, I want a close relationship, and to that person, close might mean like this close all along. But a close relationship to the other person means, oh yeah, we live in the same house, we're around each other. You know, it might not be that, like, close as a word is not particularly well defined up until you sit down and define it. So, you know, making sure that people understand that, and again, also understand that the boundaries and things like that may change over time as the relationship changes. You know, someone who's enjoyed a very close relationship with their partner for the longest time, you know, where they've always been very sexual, they've always been very active together, they've always done everything together, all that kind of thing. They might get to then having kids, and as a result of those extra little people in their lives and the other things that revolve around it, like school and extracurricular activities and dealing with their kids' friends and, you know, helping their kids see their friends and all that kind of thing, then the relationship becomes somewhat more distant compared to what it was before. And yet that closeness could still be kind of maintained, but it might just have to transform slightly for a period whilst those kids are growing up and whilst that situation is being dealt with. You know, that's the way around it. But a lot of people go, oh, well, we were this close for so long, and now this thing's changed with the kids, and it's caused this big rift. And it's not a big rift, it's just a change. But you need to understand that, firstly, the change is coming. Secondly, understand what the change means, which again, you can still have a close relationship. The definition of close might just change. It might not be an actively sexual relationship or a relationship where you never leave each other's sides, but it could be a relationship where you have your date nights that are very specific and just for you, where you have your periods that you set aside every week to make sure you share time together, even if it's just sat down together, relaxing and talking, you know, making sure that you're still very key and core to each other's lives, making sure that if sex was a big thing for you, that time is set aside for it. I know that there are lots of people, especially young people, who go, I never want to be one of those in a relationship where we're one of those couples who has to who like actually schedules like sex. But again, like, if it's what it's what you want, and it's one of the only ways to get it, and it's just the best way to do it, then do it. You know, there's no harm or nothing bad about going, my sex life, my sexual needs, and my partner's sexual needs are important, and so we're going to very specifically set some time aside for it to make sure that we're fine and that we're good and that we're happy. Yeah, there's no shame or reason that should be upsetting, and yet the number of people that, like, personally, I would be like, in my mind, I'm like, if it really comes to it, then fine. It has to. If it has to happen, it has to happen. Personally, my way of managing it in my relationships would probably be far more inclined towards more open discourse on a day-to-day, rather than going, in 2 weeks' time we will put down a date on the calendar for our monthly shenanigans. But if that's what you need, if that's what works for you, rather than a day-to-day thing, maybe if you're both very busy and you've got kids and you've got other stuff going on, then yeah, actually taking the time and going, actually, that weekend, in 3 weeks' time, that's going to be you and me weekend, and we're going to go off and we're going to do nothing but hide in a hotel room and bang each other's brains out. Or that's going to be the weekend that the kids are away, and so that's going to be party time for the adults. If that's something that works better for you, then go ahead and do it. There should be no shame or no worry about doing those things, because the only people who are actually going to be there once you've arranged that are going to be you and your partner, and possibly anyone else that you invite in, and a strange monkey creature. And so as a result, there's not going to be much else beyond that that need concern themselves with it. And in the vast majority of relationships, it's only going to be two people in that space engaging with each other during that time. And so it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. You don't even need to tell anyone else necessarily. I would imagine that if you say we're going away for the weekend without the kids, then most people would be able to guess why and what's going on. But again, you don't need to tell anyone. You don't need to spell it out. And if anyone tries digging into your private affairs, then quite frankly, they're a nosy bastard and they should possibly go away. But yeah, so everything I've been kind of talking about for the last couple of weeks at least, all kind of wraps around one core idea to an extent. But also stuff that I've been talking about since I started this channel, the 3 R's of personal strength, all of the stuff about DISC and the scale of a person, and all of these other things that I've talked about over time. Over the last, it'll be 2 years in I think it's about 12 days that I've been on YouTube making these videos. And so it's a case of going, over that whole time, every single one of those ideas, every single one of those things that I've talked about has kind of wrapped around to be, it all revolves around the same stuff. It all revolves just around people and around you. And I've talked before about having a philosophical mindset where you've a philosophical way of looking at things where everything's kind of connected and everything is this big picture idea, and you need to zero in on the little things within it. And other people would maybe call that more of a holistic approach, I guess, by going, okay, well, there are all these things, but all these things exist within this person, and so we need to deal with all of it rather than just bits of it, because people aren't, you can't take, that's the one problem with the idea of people, say, as a car to be maintained. A car, you can very literally just take out the components and put the components back in and it can work fine. Easy repair. For a person, especially a person, if we remove some of the physical, where we're talking about what they want, what they think about, what they think of themselves, what they think of other people, how they feel in certain situations, and all those kind of things, what they hope for the future. That's so ephemeral that it's really hard to work with. It's really hard to break down and establish things. And so, where I've talked about confidence in the past, and where we were talking about it just the other week in regards to confidence in a very specific situation, in the bedroom, it's that kind of, if your confidence is improving more generally, then the confidence in the bedroom is likely to follow suit. If the confidence in the bedroom gets bolstered substantially because they have a great experience, then their confidence outside of the bedroom is likely to also be bolstered, because the confidence part of them, it's not separated down into little chunks. It's all the same thing. It's just how it's applied to different situations. And it can be tough. When I've seen some old friends from school lately, I was a very shy kid in school in many ways, and for the longest time, especially when I went when I moved schools, because we moved house when I was in junior school, and then when I was in secondary school, I moved schools because the school that I initially wanted to go to didn't have any spaces, and so I was put on a waiting list. And eventually, even though I had been in one school for a full year, my name came up on the waiting list, and I got moved to the other school, which I wasn't maybe always happy about. But whether it benefited me or not really is in some ways difficult to say, in other ways easy. But as a result, though, because I went from kind of having groups of friends that I'd known for a long time and then moving elsewhere, I ended up becoming more and more shy. I ended up kind of becoming more and more thoughtful and hesitant and all those kind of things because I didn't know the people anymore. It's a thing that happens a lot in a lot of places. And it takes people a while to come out of their shell again after they've been dropped in the deep end in a new place. But it was kind of back then, like that confidence element of me never really came out until I had a lot of things paying into kind of unleashing it again. Where I was running classes as a student teacher, where I went on into management and I was running teams, where I was having more successful and enriching relationships at the time, even though none of them lasted. Where sexually I was more active and I was either having a great time or being told that I had allowed other people to have a great time, and all of those things kind of snowballed and built up around my the confidence that I had always had in me. When I was very young, I was very boisterous, I was very confident in myself, and I'd mess around a lot. But that all kind of curled up and hid that extroversion that I have from being an active personality on the task focused side of things, D-type personality, from the stuff that I've talked about in regards to DISC. That's my main kind of focal element of my personality, and it has been every time I've had another matrix done. But it's a case of going, right, well, I've got all of those things on board, but it's something that took time to come out again. But again, when I had all that confidence element of my personality, that thing inside me that allowed confidence, allowed me to act in a confident fashion, that was paid into or reduced by numerous different factors, and it was all just part of the same thing, though. And so then when it came to nowadays, where I have to present in front of people, or if I, when engaging in kind of things with friends or things with Hannah or sex in the last few relationships I've had or anything like that, it all comes down to my confidence has been bolstered and my viewpoint has been shifted to such an extent that I don't see as much degradation anymore. It's learning how to sustain it. And so, again, though, that has then made me more assertive, know more of what I want and how I want it. And so when it comes to communicating that or working on that with people, it works out better because that engagement is there. That me going, okay, we need to talk about this stuff, because if we're not honest, if we're not fair, and if we're not communicating, then this isn't a relationship. And so as a result, questions get asked, communication happens, and it all works out much better. This is why at times during other videos I've held up my relationship with Hannah at the moment as an example, because it's me putting into practice the things that I'm talking to you guys about. It's fostering that receptiveness, it's having those questions, and it's not perfect, there are ups and downs, but again, because I'm aware of those things, they're going to happen. Stages of intimacy and all that, I can see where the shifts are going to maybe start happening more. And Hannah at times can be very enthusiastic about some of those changes, And that's great, but I also know that if it's not, I'm personally aware of the fact that if it's not everything that she maybe thought it was when she was being enthusiastic, when the change happens, it might sweep the rug from under her, and it allows me the leeway and the prep time to know what's going on, how it's going on, and what I need to do to be a supportive boyfriend or to manage the fallout of it or whatever it is that's going on. And when I was younger, those were all things that I had no clue about. I didn't have them in my head at all, and so yeah, all of the relationships that I had, they collapsed over times. There were relationships where I ended up being hurt or where I hurt people. Never physically, but sometimes there are messy breakups. Sometimes there are there's an element of naivety that goes into especially early relationships. Among friends as well, there are some people who were always seen as the confident ones, always seen as the people who would do well with relationships, or at the very least getting into relationships, who were always confident in what they were doing and how they were doing it. And yet nowadays, especially, considering I'm now used to dissecting people, and I'm used to seeing kind of all of the weirdness that humanity has to offer. Some of those people, now I look back on their behaviour and I see the insecurities and the weaknesses that they actually shared with me. They just maybe hid them better, or they lashed out in a way that actually got them ahead, rather than me, who would sit there and be quiet and think about it for longer. But the difference is the kind of results are the things that matter. And so from their patterns of behaviour, in some instances, they've not grown, they've not changed, they're not happy, their insecurities have maybe got worse. And yet then you've got me, who I feel I'm as close to the person that I want to be as I can be at the moment, without some more significant shifts in my life happening before I've got the kind of space to continue to develop towards my personal ideal for myself, and so it's all about looking at what you've got, where you came from, where you want to go, and how far you've got to get there. And it's the people that do that the most effectively that have the happier time of things, and this applies very much to the stuff I've been talking over the last few weeks and over the last couple of years, where it's everything that I've been talking about is wrapped up inside you somewhere, and all of the tips, all of the lists of things for you guys to do, all the stuff I've just talked about, it all plays its part. And so if you take advantage of some of the stuff that I've said, there are times when I look at bits of research and the recommendations from them, and stuff like that, or when a bulletin comes out from a coaching place, or from even some of the information that I got from when I was learning, or when I was getting my qualifications and things, and it all comes down to a really interesting space where some of those things I just don't agree with. Some of those things just aren't practical for certain people's lives. They're not practical for my life, and so as a result, they may be things that I don't use, or when I'm talking to you guys in videos, I go, this is a thing that you can use. I don't feel it works so well. Like when, as I was mentioning a little earlier, when I was talking about role models, where in regards to confidence, use a role model. Use a role model because that way you can just pretend to be that person and build your new behaviours off their old ones. I've never felt like lots of people suggest, your favourite actor that you like the way that they operate the most, or a famous person that embodies the things that, someone that's easily recognisable to you. And I'm like, no, because they're still human. They're fallible. People who might have gone, Bill Cosby, he's nice, he's a warm person, he's funny, kind of family man, he just does his thing. I really like the cut of his jib. That's the guy who's going to be my role model for the way that I interact with people. Then you find out that he's, been accused of bothering God knows how many women in some pretty nasty ways, and he's ended up being kind of going through all these legal problems for it, and all that kind of thing. And it's like, yeah, that real life person, that role model that you chose for yourself, has let you down because they are not who you thought they were. Choose a fictional character has always been the thing that I've said. Be it a fictional character, a version of yourself that you've made for yourself, or one of the ones that when I was doing a lot more dating and relationship coaching early on, one of the things that stood out there was Han Solo, if you're a guy, or if you're a girl, to be fair. But Han Solo, he's cocky, he's confident, he's not a bad guy, but he's kind of self-interested to the point that, he's not there to harm other people, but he's just there to look out for himself, that kind of confidence and self-preservation focus and the kind of cocky fun to him, that's a good example to run with because he's a completely fictional character. He's two-dimensional. Regardless of how deep a fictional character gets, they are never going to be as fully three-dimensional as anyone else, as a real person, and so they're not going to have that dimension that lets you down, or something like that. Weird plot twists aside, and even then, there's a good chance that character is still that character. And so where a lot of other coaches will be like, oh, we'll pick anyone. I go pick more this specific space. Yeah, and it's there are things that I won't necessarily agree with, things that I sometimes go, really? But that's, everyone's lives are different and everyone needs something different. And that's another reason why, as much as I appreciate you guys coming to watch my content, even though there's only one of you watching at the moment, there's a slight issue with lots of life coaches will be like, yeah, coaching's for everybody, and to be fair, that part of the statement is true, but then they go, and I should be your coach. It's like, no. Coaching's for everyone, sure. I wouldn't be here making videos about it if I didn't believe that. But there's a slight issue there because people might find that the way that I talk, the way that I operate, some of the views that I hold, some of the tools that I use, stuff like that, they might just find that I'm not, the right guy for them. In which case, that's fine. I'd much prefer someone go and find someone that's right for them, and me just sit here and advocate to that person about the process that they are potentially investigating than anything else. You look at someone like Tony Robbins, one of the most famous coaches on the planet. He is a very American man. There's no two ways to really put that, I don't think. But as a result, sometimes, I've watched some of his seminars, I've listened to some of his tapes and things as well, glanced through a couple of his books, and it's a case of going, yeah, I mean, he knows his stuff, and he puts it across in a way, especially during his seminars and things, that's usually quite approachable and really interesting. But he's also, in part because he's just a big boisterous dude, but also he's, from the culture that he comes from, the American culture that spawned him, as it were. At times he is a lot more bombastic than maybe I personally would want, even though I'm on board with pretty much everything that he said and all the work that he's done and the things that he's bringing to bear. I'm still sat there going, could you shout less? could you maybe kind of project a little less? Or some of the stuff that he does with some of his exercises, I don't, they don't necessarily fly as well with a more reserved British audience, maybe. Which is why a lot of the British coaches that I meet are a lot more contemplative or retiring, and I'd like to think that I'm somewhere between the two. But again, if you've got someone that is very into his way of presenting, then they'll go straight for him. If you've got someone that's against it and that's the only point of reference that they know for a life coach, then that might be the only thing that they have, and it turns them off entirely. And so as a result, they might not get help or access to the coaching tools and things like that could make their lives better. And that's, again, one of the reasons why I'm here, and one of the reasons why when I got some of the survey results, which, by the way, guys, if you still want to take the survey, the link is down in the description here. But, with the survey, I wanted to learn more about you guys and what you wanted to see. And this is one of the reasons why I've been talking about sex and relationships a bit more, because one of the comments that was there was seeing more about sex and sexuality and assertiveness and confidence in the bedroom and all that kind of stuff. And, the videos that I've got coming up over the next next week, rather, not next few days, but next week, are very much trained in on that and kind of follow on from the confidence in the bedroom video. So, I'm hoping that you guys can see some more of that, and we can maybe have a bit more of a discussion around it, because next Friday I want to do another live stream. I'm not sure what time just yet, but I want to do another live stream where in the videos from this week, not the video on Monday, the video on Monday is kind of slightly disconnected, but on Tuesday, the video is about male-specific insecurities, and then the one on Thursday is about female-specific insecurities. No, Wednesday is female-specific insecurities, and the one on Thursday is about general insecurities about sex and things that everyone holds. And all of these are sexually focused, for the most part. And, they're broad insecurities, and they're insecurities that affect you regardless of your sexuality, but are more focused on your sex. You will find, say, gay men and straight men who both have their concerns about their penis size and about their performance and all that kind of thing. You will have both straight and lesbian women who both have concerns about, about body, their body shape, and about things like that they might not be able to control. And then you've got the insecurities that kind of cover both men and women, because they're much more ephemeral and nebulous and kind of more to do with what we're thinking necessarily than what we're equipped with. And so, I've got those videos, and next week I want to go ahead and do a video a live stream on the Friday like I have done this week. Keep an eye out on Wednesday, because I've taken to scheduling the live streams that I'm doing on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. So at the very latest by Wednesday, there will be a time up for when the live stream will be. And if there are any insecurities, any questions, any other things that you guys have seen in those videos that you would prefer to further discuss, or insecurities and things that you haven't seen in those videos that you would like to discuss, then please bring them to the live stream, or leave them in the comments on those videos, or leave them in the comments on the video on demand archive from the live stream, because then I can go about making other videos about them. I can address them right then and there in the live stream, and stuff like that. So I would love to have more of that discourse kind of floating around, and doing stuff that way, and kind of using this time where I've had one individual pop into the live stream to watch and thank you very much for turning up, but you've not said anything so far, and so it's a case of whether, whilst I appreciate people just coming to listen to what I've got to say, and where I can take this time over a bit more of a longer period where I can just speak frankly about the stuff I've been doing in the week, or things in regards to YouTube, or I can just waffle and ramble on. Whilst I very much appreciate that, I'm here to try and help you guys. That's what I want to do. So if you guys have got concerns, if you guys have got questions, or if you guys have got things that I've maybe missed from videos because the videos that I've made are focused off pieces of research that have told me what the most frequent, or articles that have told me what the most frequent insecurities are, where in a sexual health survey from 2012, it was something like 90-something% of men said that penis size was in a top 5 concern in regards to sex and their relationships. And it's like, right, so that and the associated issues with it, so penis size, the perception of their penis and the performance of their penis are all going to be kind of wrapped up into an insecurity that I can address. So that's what I'll do. But, if you've got something that's different, bring it along. We'll have a chat about it. Yeah? As long as you're willing to share. And if you're not willing to share, then, and you would much prefer to kind of maybe have it discussed, but to do so anonymously, my email, the Silver Mountain Coaching email, is down there in the description as well. Please feel free to send me something there, or even drop me a message through Facebook. Either or, everything works. So as long as I can get it, then I can do something for it, as it were. But as we're in the last kind of quarter of an hour of the live stream now, because I'm going to be going off and sorting out some other bits and pieces, and then some food, I think, is on the cards for me. One of the things that I wanted to say was there is still a video where a couple of times I've had the live stream and it's been the only video that's been up for a Friday. There is still another video coming out at 5, so when this when this live stream finishes, there will be the next Conan Exiles video going up, where Hannah and I are testing out some more builds, and where we are beating the stuffing out of each other, and it's a lot of fun. And I think that's one of the things that I've enjoyed about those videos the most, even if I've maybe not been as meticulous with either my setup on those videos, because I've been a bit rushed with some of the setup on them, and I've kind of maybe in some instances been not as meticulous with my analysis of stuff, and kind of our performance using the various builds, because it's just been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun to have with Hannah, because, considering we're long distance, considering that she's only just finishing her degree, or she's finished all the work but waiting for the full pass, and whatever else, considering all of that, it's been at times very difficult to find time to just do stuff together. So now that she's got a little bit more time, even though I am also now trying to do more, and so I don't have as much time necessarily for everything, it's been really great to just sit down and play for a while with her on a couple of games that we just really enjoy, so I hope that at the very least, even if you don't really care for the builds that I've been making and the way that we're testing it and anything else, I'm hoping that you're enjoying us just having fun and beating the crap out of each other in those videos. But yeah, otherwise, as said, I'm only here for the next 10-ish minutes. So yeah, I think I've kind of maybe talked myself out a little bit. I think that's one of the problems with the live streams that I'm doing at the moment, because I go in with an idea of what I want to talk about, because I know that there are maybe only going to be 2-3 people, maybe a few more, but also it's a case of, I know that maybe if I did these live streams at a different time, more people would see them, more people would turn up, but it's then trying to find the right time and trying to slot it into my day, and that can be difficult. And I'd much prefer to put the video up with all that information, all the stuff that I've been thinking about, all the stuff I've been talking about, or whatever, and then leave it there as a video on demand and have people catch up with that when they can, rather than, at the very least for the moment, there is a time when I would like to be able to do more experimentation in when a live stream would hit more of you guys. I mean, if you've got suggestions about when you would be around to watch a live stream, let me know, and I can do some experimenting. I can, if you guys allow me a little bit more, kind of narrow down the field a little bit so that I can actually go and take a look and go, right, well, maybe 8 p.m. my time allows me to hit more of the audience that are actually watching, so I'll try doing a couple at 8 p.m. Earlier in the day, you guys want one at 9 o'clock in the morning my time. Great, okay, well then I'll go and do whatever. But, just remember, if you're leaving a suggestion for a time for live streams where you would be more able to watch, if you would like to watch, and have a discourse as well, then, just remember, I'm in the UK. I'm not necessarily asking you to do the time conversions yourself, but just remember to leave which time zone you're talking about. Yeah, so if you're talking about kind of Eastern Standard Time, say I'm around at X time Eastern Standard Time, so I actually know where you're talking about and what you're talking about, so that then I can go, actually, okay, I can go and take a look, and I will maybe do a live stream closer to that time, after working out what that time is for me, So just the number of times that I've been talking to people internationally and I've said, okay, well, I'm around at 3. And then I don't get a call until 7, 8 o'clock in the evening because my 3 and their 3 are very different and they've not taken that into account. Or I've forgotten to take it into account myself. So, just if you've got a suggestion for a time for a live stream that you would be more able to watch or something like that, then, drop that down in the comments, and just remember to leave which kind of time zone you're quoting time from, so that I could actually kind of make sure that I'm doing it at the right time. As an experiment here and experiment there, I'm always happy to try kind of new stuff, and there are new things that I want to do all the time. It's just a chance of opportunity and working out how and when not just when to do it, but when I would be able to do the prep for it, or when I'd be able to do the work around it. You guys all, pretty much all of you, said that you wanted to see me do some of the interviews that I've got in mind, and so as a result, I've started investigating how to go about that, how to get in touch with certain people, but it's in a lot of cases these people are also busy as well, so I can't really say if it'll happen, when it'll happen, or anything like that. So it's going to be work in progress on those at the very least for the time being. But it's the thing in my head at the moment where I've got certain things that are chugging along really well. I've got certain things that are maybe not progressing as fast as I'd like, and then I've got other things that are kind of running into brick walls. And then there's the long list of things that I can see happening, that I want to make happen, and that I can see the path to making them happen. But they're like the first couple of steps along them are kind of shaky, or, as with anything, the hardest. And having the time, having the resources to kind of make those first couple of steps is the big thing that's in question. So, that's one of the things that you guys can always help me with, because as a friend of mine said quite rightly the other day, helping people doesn't always mean money, which, admittedly, if you want to give me money, as some of you have very generously said, then that's something I'm going to be looking into. Again, I've kind of wanted your feedback on that, guys, so if you've got some thoughts on that, drop it down, just down in the description there. You've got the SurveyMonkey link to the survey that I put out, that will be up still for a bit longer, so that I can try and gather as much new and useful information as possible from you guys. So, and there's stuff in there about Patreon, what you guys would like to see, or from a Patreon-like service, and what you guys would like to see from doing that, because I wouldn't want to just take money and not give a little bit extra for people that are kind of helping me along. But yeah, it's a case of the other way. There's always kind words, nice comments, constructive criticism on comments rather than some of the ranty negative ones that I get sometimes. Exposure, if you like what I'm doing, if you find the videos useful, or if you find them entertaining, like some of the gaming ones, if you find them entertaining, share them around, show your friends. If you know someone that has issues or has a problem, and I've not talked about it yet, then maybe get them to drop me a message, drop me a comment, drop me an email, and maybe I'll turn it into another video. Maybe I'll go away, find out what I can about it if it's something I'm not familiar with, and then put it all together and bring it to you guys as something that hopefully would be useful. So there was one thing that a teacher of mine always used to say, and she was one of the best teachers I ever had, and we would always be sat there as a class, very quiet. Yeah, we would listen to what she had said, and then we would just kind of okay, fine, and then get on with the work. And she would always want feedback from us. She would always want to know whether or not we'd got it, whether or not we had questions, whether or not we had ideas around it, whether or not there were other things we wanted to say about it. That's what I want from you guys. It's why I've started doing live streams more, every, at the very least, every couple of weeks, at the end of the week. Just because it's like I want that communication from you guys. I want to know what you want to talk about. I want to know what issues you're having. I want to know how best I can help you guys and what you would be willing to do to help me help you. Yeah? Because as I've said in numerous videos before, if I could get away without charging people and yet still do what I do, help people, act as that mirror for them, so that they can kind of address themselves and find the path that they want to walk, climb that mountain, beat that dragon. If that's the thing that I could do and I didn't need to be as competitive just to survive within the industry that I'm in, then I would happily do it. So the way for me to get to be able to do that, but not just me, but for you guys as well, is with just that little bit of maybe extra exposure, extra support from you guys who have just enjoyed the stuff that I'm putting up. And then if you're one of the few people who have made some very generous suggestions, very generous offers, then hopefully I'll, after just gathering a little bit more information, I'll have something that you guys can engage with as well, which would mean the world to me. Additionally, mean the world to me. But either way, thank you very much for dropping by, guys. If you have, like the couple that are watching at the moment now, hopefully you guys will if you haven't been able to show up and take a look at the stream, then there's going to be the video on demand on YouTube shortly afterwards. So if you've not kind of dropped by and taken a look at that yet, then hopefully you will, and you will see me saying this at the end of the video. But otherwise, I'm, as said, a couple of minutes, there's going to be this Friday's Conan Exiles video with me and Hannah beating the stuffing out of each other. And otherwise, I hope you guys have a kind of great weekend, and that at the very least, the videos I've been doing the last couple of weeks that I was talking about at the beginning of the live stream today, I hope they've made a difference to some of you, because I've had some messages and comments and things in the past when I've talked about relationships and things, especially, they seem to make the biggest differences to you guys when I'm talking about relationships, relationship dynamics, how to cope with things like breakups or lack of confidence and all that kind of thing. Those seem to make the biggest impact on you guys, and they seem to be the most helpful, which is why when I saw in the survey results so far someone going, could you please do more stuff on sex and relationships and all that kind of thing, I was more than happy to do it, because it's genuinely the stuff that seems to not just be the most useful to you guys, but the most appreciated. So, and I very much appreciate you guys for dropping by, taking a look at the videos, and just helping me out and engaging with me when you can, and giving me ideas for videos in the future. But anyway, otherwise, thank you very much, guys, and enjoy the video later, or in a couple of minutes, and otherwise, I will see you in the video on Monday at 2 p.m. UK time. Take care.